I believe that there is a place for some hierarchy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think of it more as like a little hill than a mountain size hierarchy. Everybody has a part to play, and everybody sits on a team with a different level of experience and expertise. Everyone's contributions matter, and ideally contribute to the success of the project and the team. And I really truly believe that my colleague's success is my success. My success is my colleague's success. There is a very personal and professional stake in other people's success on our team that I think is very important to maintain, not only as a leader, but it encourages teamwork.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Team Lab. I'm Corey Caldwell here with Angela Migliaccio as always, and today we are talking about something that's been on a lot of leaders' minds this year: what it takes to lead and maintain trust across global teams while the geopolitical landscape shifts underneath us. We're thrilled today to talk to Jillian Foster, founder of Global Insight, who brings more than 2 decades of experience coordinating complex, multi-country research initiatives, partnering with highly matrixed international organizations and teams. Her fundamental purpose is taking complex human, geopolitical, and organizational dynamics and turning them into clear, actionable intelligence that helps leaders make better decisions that lead to meaningful impact. Jillian is also a gender, peace, and security expert and doctoral researcher in political science at Yale University, and her team's work has influenced programming and policy across countless INGOs around the world. In this episode, we discuss the reality of managing cross-cultural tensions, why shifting large organizational structures relies on a crucial tipping point of internal alignment, and the critical distinction between mentorship and active sponsorship. Jillian's approach to global leadership in high-stakes, high-purpose-driven environments is an inspiring lesson you can start applying now with your team. Let's jump into our conversation with Jillian Foster.
Jillian Foster, hello. Thank you for being on the Team Lab podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Jillian joins us today with 20 plus years of experience with global teams, geopolitical experience, what it takes to hold and develop trust across countries, across cultures for global teams. So, Jillian, you've said the past year added a layer of weight to global teams, and not because anyone's misbehaving, but because of what's happening in the world and where the U.S. sits in it. So we're going to go a little political today. In teams terms, when you're on a call with a colleague whose reality is far from yours, how do you actually hold the trust in the room and still get the work done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the start of the second Trump administration, things became kind of almost immediately very chaotic, not only geopolitically, but also with the type of work that we do and the funding that, half of our portfolio of work relies on. So the administration ended essentially USA in the blink of an eye, which then put a lot of our projects and our partnerships in question. But that also meant that the income that was planned for by our colleagues, largely outside the US in more vulnerable or precarious situations than our team members inside the US, perhaps, it put their income in question almost immediately, right? Like everything was kind of up in the air as of January 23rd. And so having to deal with that as the lead of a team while knowing that this was outside of our control, but it has real direct ramifications, not only on what we can do for work, how we do the work, but also the team members themselves and their families. So for example, we have team members in Lebanon, we have team members in and around Afghanistan, Iran, all throughout Europe, East Africa, Rwanda, in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's so many different places where we have people that we work with where what's happening in the US really directly affects them, and kind of vice versa, right? What's happening in these other locations affects us as well. As everyone I'm sure can tell, 2026 has really brought that forward for most people, I would assume. Though as researchers, we were kind of aware of it before. So the ways of navigating this it added a new intensity, a new urgency, as well as a need for a lot of care. And so, how to do this, I feel like we were kind of me and the rest of my team, we were all kind of feeling around in the dark because it was a very dramatic shift when USAID was ended. And what it meant is digging into other budgets, digging into the way we structure the business. I have always had a very careful budgeting so that we have a bit of cushion. And that way, if things like this happen, we can offer a bit of cushion to our colleagues. So that's what we did, and offered a bit more of a financial cushion to people, but eventually had to let people go in various rounds of layoffs. But that's not where the story ends, because we're all colleagues, but we also care about one another. And we know as researchers, the work that we do affects businesses, corporates, policymakers, geopolitics. So the work that we do has international impact, but also those international geopolitical moves have an impact on the lives, like kind of the physical space in which our colleagues inhabit. So, for example, my dear colleague from Afghanistan, his family has been displaced kind of back and forth and around Afghanistan and the general kind of geographic area for many years. And when Trump started bombing Iran again, this directly impacted his family because he has family there. And so that means that they now have to consider not only financial and job loss that he's dealing with, but also where they're going to place themselves and for how long. And is it safe? Is it not safe? What does this all look like? So it's taken a lot of, I would say, care and sensitivity and giving space for people to not only grieve the future that they thought they would have, but kind of regroup together and try to find solutions together, even if those solutions are not exactly what we all had planned or not exactly what we wanted to have happen. So this looks like supporting visa applications, looking for other work or other financial support that our colleagues might access. This is not just the one colleague from Afghanistan, this is multiple colleagues. Yeah, it requires a lot of sensitivity.
Yeah, sensitivity to understand and put yourself into the other person's shoes. The other thing that came up for me as you were starting telling that story, these are decisions that are out of our hands. You know, you show up in that call as a US citizen, and this was a decision made by the US. But I didn't ask you before making that decision, right? And so a lot of times people relate with things that are not inside the circle of our control.
Mm-hmm.
And how to deal with that and how that affects the dynamic of the team, because now the team is left to handle that situation where the ground has been shaken under their feet, and they have to manage that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of us as a team, and I don't think that the teamwork stops when the work or project necessarily stops, right? So everyone's kind of connection to the team was solid and really about the work. But then as the work itself transitioned or changed through ending of USAID or through ending of partnerships because there was no longer funding, then the work might have ended, but the relationships carry forward. And I think that's where you build in strength of a team, and you build in also your leadership style, knowing that like your colleagues will be colleagues for a long, long time, no matter what organization they're with, whether it's yours or someone else's. And so to really offer them the dignity that they deserve. And then in turn, they offer you that dignity and respect as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the leadership style. And within organization that you work in now, that you've experienced in the past, where do leaders learn these skills? Like, is it just natural? I mean, I've been in companies where they just don't have it. But in your world, there are implications of not being empathetic. But where do they learn this? Is it learnable?
Yeah, I think it's learnable, though it's often not taught, like you're saying. I still see it sometimes in projects that I work on. I'm like, wow, why would this person do X, Y, or Z or treat this other person this way? It's always astonishing. And you can see leadership patterns that really work and really don't. So for me, it's been a series of trial and error and really trying to focus in on number one, how would I want to be treated myself with dignity and respect? and respect for my expertise and my experience. And then also with opportunity, with efficiency and a focus on doing the work well as a team rather than this kind of deep hierarchy, which I find just doesn't work that well with teams, especially when you're working in environments where the work is sensitive. There are often security concerns. There's often confidential data. Like this is not always the most easy, streamlined process. You have to, as a leader, make it easier and make it more streamlined and really build in the resilience in the team to overcome what are inevitable obstacles, challenges, twists in the process that will appear. And I find that the leaders that work with me on my team, I start to notice some people have qualities that lend themselves to growth in leadership. For example, this might sound odd, but I think it is such a positive trait when people have a great attention to detail. And when you have a really keen eye for the details, for me, that's a sign that you have the ability to carry lots of moving parts at once and still hone in on those details. And so those are the people that I like to nurture and to build. And I find that kind of learning by doing and learning through mentorship is really helpful for leaders because there will be inevitable challenges on teams, personalities. With ours, it's like cross-cultural to the max. So there's kind of often misunderstandings. We're working across languages. Everyone has a lot going on in their lives outside of work. So working with other leaders and building them up and doing it in partnership with them, not in a dictatorial, hierarchical way, but in a, hey, I'm here to partner with you and your success is my success. So, let's build your leadership together and I'll help you to kind of solve the kinks as they come about.
Yeah, there's diversity and, different backgrounds and different culture, different experience can make you feel like you don't belong. And it can also make you feel like we're stronger together. There is a complementarity there of we're unique, we're different. And yet when we come together, this team, because of how different we are, this team is strong, that synergy that we talk about. So I heard hierarchy doesn't work anymore is an old playbook of leadership, of organizations, of systems. We're finding out more and more in the workplace. So let's talk about what does work instead. And if you have research to share, great. I'm sure you have the experience of what are the new systems and the new structures.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would say also, I have some stories I can share from our work, and I'm thinking of one in particular. So we were doing a really large study. It was a 6-country study. That means that the team itself for research was very large. We had not only country-based teams, but then a regional person, couple different global people. It was a lot of humans involved in this and lots of administrative kind of paperwork and burden, getting different permissions and different ethical reviews, getting budgets and money sent different places, right? It's a complex project by design. And I remember we had a point in it, this is just one example of a challenge that came about where we had this excellent guy working as a regional person. I adore him, worked with him many times in the past. We elevated him to a regional role. And then there was another person who was leading 2 of the countries as the lead researcher across both. So we were all together on the team. I was the principal investigator, meaning the buck stops with me at the end of the day. It's my responsibility to get the study off the ground and across the finish line at the end of the day. Right. And at one point we had a challenge of one person wanted to see things go to the right. The other person wanted to see things go to the left, and different personalities as well as different cultures. These 2 people are from different countries. It's a man and a woman. They're slightly different in age and experience level. They're both well qualified, but they are slightly different in these regards, and they have slightly different, I would say, expertise and experience as well, right? And one person felt the other person was kind of lording over them. The other person felt the other person was disrespectful and lording over them. There was kind of this back and forth brewing. And I said, all right, that's it. Like, everybody, let's just have a meeting, the 3 of us, and like, we'll figure out what's going on here and we'll kind of squash it. So we did. And a lot of it was around misunderstandings of culture and language and ways of working. There was a bit of gender stuff in there too, which is really common, where men can sometimes get a bit hierarchical or a bit kind of lording over the other person in a way that I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they don't realize it. Okay. But it's unpleasant to experience nonetheless. And it's also misplaced, especially on our teams. I just don't put up with it. So it was just a matter of coming together, speaking candidly, lowering the temperature of the conversation, and finding a solution and a path forward. It is completely normal to have, I would say, tensions. Dispute feels too strong, right? But tensions on a team. But if you don't address them and you don't address them transparently, I think that it just lingers and it can grow. And with a study this complicated across 6 different countries, we do not have room to add tension to the mix or to add a full-blown dispute, right? So I would rather just kind of hit it off straight away, and in so doing, maintain respect for one another and maintain the elevation of one another as colleagues and partners in this process. So that's one example.
Is there any pertinent research to emerging trends that require a new system? Like, what's going to replace hierarchy? We keep saying hierarchy is dying a slow death, but what is going to fill in the blank there?
Yeah, so I should say, I believe that there is a place for some hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
But I think of it more as like a little hill than a mountain size hierarchy. Everybody has a part to play, and everybody sits on a team with a different level of experience and expertise, and that's totally fine. But everyone's contributions matter and ideally contribute to the success of the project and the team. And I really, truly believe that my colleague's success is my success. My success is my colleague's success, right? Like there is a very personal and professional stake in other people's success on our team that I think is very important to maintain, not only as a leader, but it encourages teamwork. And it's also, I just believe it's just flat out true. So some of the research that we've done, our team at Global Insight is hired to support organizations. This is for-profit, nonprofit, corporate, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and sometimes even policymakers. The studies that we conduct and lead on these kinds of workforce topics are often internal facing for rightful reasons, right? Companies and organizations don't necessarily want this information to be made public about them, and they don't have any stake in making this externally available. Instead, we use it for our own scholarship, our own research from there, and we build with it for other projects, right? So a few different things that come forward, I would say, from our work as well as from the scholarly literature in this area. So number one, engaging in cross-cultural skill and knowledge share. Employees find that really rewarding. They like it. It's good for employee retention, and it helps team members feel like they are contributing in unique and important ways, both on their team, if you're able to kind of skill share and cross-culture share that way, but also across organizations and even one organization to another. So partnerships. We've seen this in spaces as kind of diverse as a corporate, a multinational corporate with a multinational and INGO, right? Nonprofit sector, for-profit sector coming together, partnering and doing great work together that is not only helpful for the literal work that each of them do, but it also helps employees feel like they're doing something important with their work, and it's rewarding, and it's like kind of exercising a different muscle. The other thing I'll say, and this talks about hierarchy, we recently finished a study that was Africa focused, meaning it was all across Africa. If my memory is correct, it was engaging a large number of countries. It was professionals across a variety of spaces. And the big question we were trying to ask in this study is what leads to institution change? We're looking at old, archaic, big, gigantic bureaucracy type institutions that need to change, but these types of institutions struggle to change because it's like steering a gigantic cruise ship in a different direction, right? It's just incredibly difficult. And people in these spaces, workers, leaders, they get kind of disgruntled, right? Like they just kind of burn out the fire within. And so you find that a lot of people are just kind of head down doing their job, pushing papers here or there, right? The bare minimum, or what we might call quiet quitting at times.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that? What do you do? How do you invigorate new practices, new ways of working, as well as new energy into a space that might feel like the energy has been kind of sucked out of it, right? So, what we noticed is that if you want to drive institution change, especially big bureaucratic kind of big ship kind of organizations, it takes 10 people. 10 people is the tipping point where you move from an individual feeling like they're trying to enact change within on an individual, slow, perhaps not successful path to 10 people in the organization, ideally working in synergy. Those 10 people can make the change. They can slowly shift the big ship. And it doesn't mean that it will be overnight, right? These are big organizations.
So are we
But
saying that doesn't matter the size of the company, 10 is that kind of
I would
magic
say
number
10 for a multinational big corporation,
for
a big,
multinational big corporations? So it could be 10 or less, 10 people or less.
yeah, because if your team
The
is very
comp,
small, if
yeah,
if your organization is 10 people, then it requires less humans.
yeah,
But if your organization is large, if it's a corporate, if it's like maybe it's one of 10 offices or something, right?
yeah.
It requires 10 people.
But what are the profiles of these 10 people?
Yeah, so the best is to have a diverse team, diverse set of experiences. I would say diverse collaborators, because a lot of times these people sit on different teams, but they're colleagues enough to know one another and to be able to collaborate with one another toward this change. And this change is very often not immediate kind of direction shift in an organization. Instead,
Right.
it's slow but steady, calculated change within an organization that leads to the improvement for all. And a lot of it, like this looks like AI adoption. It looks like better ethics within an organization. It looks like greater efficiencies unearthed and then adopted throughout different teams. And you can think of it as 10 people working in concert, kind of spreading throughout the organization, the change kind of slow, like a wave, a slow but steady wave of change.
Spread throughout the organization, I think that's important. And I'm trying to kind of extract this study and make it more adaptable for other situations. Like maybe the company is not as big, maybe they don't have all that time to steer in a different direction. So what I'm hearing is the diversity of that SWAT team, the 10 people,
Yeah.
in spearheading this change. And all the companies that we work with, they're all going through change and transformation is the
Oh,
thing
yeah.
for everybody. And so you need this team that is piloting, that is not the CEO. That's an assumption that I'm making. I want you to weigh in on that. That is not the CEO and the people that report to the CEO, because they may not have the view, the perspective of, the people that are doing the work. So a variety there of roles, a variety of experience. And I'm also thinking, Jillian, usually there's people that want change. They are more, right? They're more keen to change and to renew and do things in a different way. So take the ones that raise their hand, and that may be a few more. And that's the team that you need.
It's definitely not the CEO, and it's definitely, well, I would say traditionally, not those that directly report to the CEO. Those people are the ones that are hardest to change, that are often not receptive to changes. unless there's some sort of major hiccup that they're trying to address, it's typically quite difficult to get them to make change. Instead, the durable change that we see in institutions comes from, I would say, largely that middle layer of people. They have institutional knowledge, they have some experience with the organization. Ideally, they've also had experience outside of the teams and organizations they're working on now, so they can reflect that information in their pathways forward. And they've identified, a handful of areas where minor changes can incite major progress toward these larger goals that they're moving toward. And it's really exciting, but it requires a dedicated effort, I would say. I think thinking about it as a slow moving wave is the right way to think about it, in that over a long period of time, long 2 to 5 to 10 years, right? Like major change will be seen by 10 years, but 2 to 5 years, lots of minor changes can add up to significant change in an organization toward very positive things. And it requires at least 10 people to really get together and enact that change and push for that in concert and support of one another.
Right. And whether they're in different countries, that may be a benefit as well. The idea of different cultures interacting, like you were saying, those two that were in conflict. I think about if you're part of this 10 Tiger Team people, right, who have an idea in mind of how this change over time might happen. They've got hope in their hearts. They're ready to go at it the long term. Can you talk a little bit about the need for some level of vulnerable trust, understanding maybe on a human level? Not to say that because culturally, a lot of times the Dutch might not want to share personal information as much as Americans would, or just their outside lives, or, talk about that idea of kind of what's required on the trust level in terms of vulnerable trust.
Yeah. So I think I see this more in my own advisory practice, right? When I'm working with executives or leaders themselves who are either trying to build institutions or teams for the first time, or maybe for brand new in some regard, or who are trying to manage this fine balance between their own success and the success of their team or organization. What does that look like? How do I become a better leader? How do I be a leader where collaboration is really deeply held and felt, and thus kind of propelling myself forward, my own success forward as well? Trust is super important, and I believe, and research has shown, that you really imbue trust in a relationship by being honest and vulnerable yourself. There's one caveat though. When you're working with people who are in a different place on the team, perhaps younger in their career, newer in the institution, you need to moderate what level of transparency you're offering, because if you just full on give it all, it's not that that's bad, it's that it can be overwhelming for someone. And it might lead to panic, where perhaps panic is not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, to kind of filter the level of transparency depending on, are you talking to your peers? Are you talking to your leaders? Are you talking to the people that report to you? And use a different meter of sensitivity of how the news may be received. And the other piece that I would add is, if you're just disclosing for the sake of disclosing, is one thing. But if you're disclosing because you're enrolling the help of people, the support of the team, then it's different, right? Because now you're kind of rallying, the team to, we're in this together and we win together, and we're facing these challenges, but we'll get to the end of it. And so different conversations to have.
I think that's a really good way to think about it. And it's not necessarily that you are withholding information from anyone. It's that you're understanding the kind of the lens through which they're seeing the work in the world at the moment, and using that to moderate the way that you speak to them, or perhaps even better said, the amount of depth and information you offer them so that they can take it in without feeling overwhelmed. And that buy-in is so important, like you're saying. I mean, that's for me is really what it's all about, is to create that team environment where we're really rooting for one another and we're working in concert together. Because if we're not working in concert, then it's going to be a disaster on the team,
Right.
especially when it comes to tensions and challenges that you might see fit. I would also add, I don't know if you've all experienced this, but I like to have teams where we have times where we can blow off steam. And I don't know if I'm not to say this, I like, a space where you can talk shit basically about whatever's going on either in the work or your life. And for me, that's important to have a space where you can kind of blow off steam. And then we can also have a space on the same team where, okay, now that we've like all gotten that out, now let's talk about like solutions and ways forward and how we're going to handle this together.
Yeah, I love that. Is what Brené Brown would call the rumbling with
Oh, I
vulnerability,
haven't heard this.
to have those sessions where you can just be vulnerable with each other, you can open up, you can go unfiltered, unscripted, and then he goes, okay, and now that we got that out of our system, you know, what do we do
It's
about it?
nice to know that you can go to other people and say like, hey, this thing happened. It wasn't really pleasant. Like, that was not cool. I don't like it. And then say, okay, so with that in the background, how are we going to move forward? Because we can't just stop there. Like, we still have to do the work. We still have to conquer XYZ hurdle in life, you know?
Right. And it's like a judgment free zone, right? No one's going to hold what you were rumbling about against you
Yeah.
later, and you're right. It's part of being human in the workplace,
Yeah.
and it gives you more empathy for the other one of where they're coming from. So if
Hmm.
someone has a really intense, what's happened in the morning to them, maybe this will all help everyone kind of regulate nervous system. Because
Yeah.
that's the end of the day.
It,
We all have a nervous system when we come into the room with people.
Yeah,
Right.
this one thought leader who has become a dear friend of mine. I don't know if you've ever heard of Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote this
Yes.
book called Never Eat Alone. Yeah, he's very lovely. So one thing that he's taught me is this concept of a sweet and sour, and I love doing this with teams. And you practice it. The whole point is, as a leader, you model it yourself as well. So you offer a sweet thing that's happened to you and a sour thing that's happened to you. And this is not like far off in the past or like a huge life traumatic event. This is kind of like something prescient happening now, like in the moment. This morning, this happened. Yesterday, this happened. Or this is something I'm kind of ruminating on that's difficult. And you hold space for that as each team member shares their own sweet and sour. And importantly, you don't offer solutions to this. This is a
Right.
period of the meeting where you're just sharing. And then it's like, okay, now for the work, like
Love
now for
that.
the moving forward.
Love that as an icebreaker. Yeah, without
Yeah,
going into problem solving or coaching, just
right.
I think Keith is the author of one of my favorite expressions for difficult conversations, the sweaty palms conversations. I think it
Yes.
comes from him. Yeah. And, if you're listening to this conversation and you are a leader, I do want to point out you have to build that container. And these icebreakers, right, at the beginning of a call, of a meeting, you have to create that container so that people feel safe because, these are moments that make the team grow, but could also compromise relationships if you don't have that safe container of we're just going to share and we're not going to judge and, we're not going to
Yeah.
fix. Yeah. It's just a moment to coming together with what's sweet and what's sour. I love that in our work and life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jillian, what happens to all of this? Humans are complicated enough, and then you insert technology into the mix,
Yes.
and technology across borders. So, give us an experience. I mean, my experience is so American based, U.S. North America based of technology and AI. You know, I'm located in Silicon Valley, so this is my reality. But you have experience with teams dealing, you know, across borders with technology, with the use or not use, the trust or not trust. Yeah, give us some of those stories.
Yes. Okay. So this is becoming less of an issue, I would say now as the world, has evolved. But kind of the most tangible differences across borders has always been internet access and bandwidth speed or kind of Wi-Fi speed, right? And so this has direct implications on the ways that we work on a day-to-day basis. Even with colleagues in Europe, the Wi-Fi is not always equal. I'll just say that. So sometimes this looks like having to have cameras off at meetings, which for me, you lose an element of connection in that way, but it just is what it is, right? Like it's just no one can really do anything about that. That's like a decision outside of our control. Sometimes we work in places where the government is not as friendly and they will cut the Wi-Fi without warning, which also cuts the phone lines without warning because everyone's using cell phones. So you will suddenly lose access to colleagues and you have to kind of find a way to work around that to get information to understand what's going on. This is really important with the work that we do because we're on timelines, tight schedules with confidential information. Also, data security is a constant concern for us. So that impacts the way that we use AI, for example. We don't feed primary data into AI at all. In fact, we're careful about what we use AI for when it even comes to producing outputs because there's a lot of like private confidential information in what our clients share with us. That means that we're not working always at the speed of AI, but that's fine. We work in places where AI is not always welcome, available, accessible. So it's very different kinds of working and ways of working, which means we have to be super flexible. The way that we work together, the team structure that we build, some people working at all different hours of the day and night, which is totally fine, right? But having that flexibility built in and the permission structure to have that flexibility is really important for us. And a lot of times our partners or our clients are themselves considering the changes that they're experiencing. So for example, when we work with governments or even big multinational organizations, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, this question of technology, like the literal software you use, the Wi-Fi speed, the computers and the computer access, cell phones, tablets, like both the hardware and the software, as well as the skills around those tools. This is something that is an active conversation that is going on, and everyone is trying to decide where to put the resources, both time as well as money, and how that will trickle throughout their own work, their team, their organization, and then onto the market. The market is especially important for large corporates, government partners, international policymakers. And we see this around AI. We see this around the advancement in technology around like smartphones, for example. This is a continuing conversation around smartphones. And then also access to the internet and whether or not there are bounds on that, because in many places throughout the world, there are various levels of bounds on what you can access on the internet. So I would say that the uniting factor across all of this is to be flexible and to constantly be learning and exploring and supporting that learning and exploring of your team.
Yeah. And I would imagine also what the cost of choosing or not choosing
Yeah.
the level of technology. There's an advantage and there's always, a price to pay. And so being able to look ahead and understand, is it going to slow us down? Is it going to compromise the quality of our insights because we have less data to start with, things
Yeah.
of that nature.
We see this in kind of a very real, tangible way with surveys. So we do a lot of market and consumer research, for example, right? And when we're doing original data collection or primary data collection, the easiest way to do this now is on tablets, basically smartphones or iPads or small iPads or Samsungs or whatever, right? Not every place, not every partner and client has these things at their disposal, has the budget to buy them even. So the backup is pen and paper. Pen and paper it's like the tried and true with a survey, but it leaves room for human error. It adds considerably to the amount of staff time needed to process the data. Literal data entry has to go on, versus the initial investment of buying tablets or supporting tablets in some way to then collect the data, right? And we see this even to a greater degree when, say, you're working in a place where we see this in the US, we see this in places where like everyone and their brother has Wi-Fi and a smartphone. And so the initial thought is, oh, we'll have people do household surveys or consumer surveys. We'll just send them a link and they'll do it. Well, nobody wants to do a survey. So how do you encourage them when you're not literally in front of their face trying to get them to answer a survey? It's a different feeling. It's a different vibe. It's a different process. Even though the tech is high, then the personal touch we assume won't be needed, but it's actually, you need more personal touch.
High tech, high touch.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's a constant conversation that goes on.
Yeah. God, you brought me back. I know, it's so many things that I give for granted. Of course, yeah, we'll have a form and we'll send the link and people will just, click on the answers and done.
Done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then inevitably they make mistakes or they don't understand something.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes we'll go to the ends of the earth to get the data. And sometimes that means we've sent you a link to do a survey and you haven't answered. And so now we're calling you, asking you if you want to do the survey over the phone right then and there. So, which is adding in high touch, right?
Yeah.
Human and the technology coming together.
Yeah.
With lots of what I'm hearing is like adaptability, patience, flexibility, emotional intelligence, especially when you've got technology in the mix with multiple cultures, countries, first world, third world, everyone together trying to work things out.
Everyone's trying to navigate their way. And everyone deserves the respect and understanding that they offer you. And, you should lead with respect and dignity built in, I believe, and kind of stay flexible to navigate from there. But you're right, patience, emotional intelligence, all of these things are super important because you don't want to lose your cool.
Right. Okay, speaking of losing cool, let's take a look at another lens of this, because I know you have maybe some thoughts on generations in the workplace and what's going on there.
Most definitely. So just as background to give the listeners an idea of perhaps where I'm coming from, I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial. And so my generation, especially older millennials, have been just put through the ringer, to be honest. It's just been one thing after another. And so I find that a lot of my peers are not burnt out, but I like to say burnt to a crisp, like just really fully burnt. And at this point, exhausted and for a long, long time, feeling a bit mentorless, I would say. And so what I see, and I feel very strongly about this, mentorship is so important. And I actually heard someone the other day talk about not just mentorship, but sponsorship. And I thought, oh, that's a really good way to put it. Especially women need this. Women at all stages, but I mean, most dramatically, perhaps young women. Not only a mentor to help you navigate the waters, to help you see what are opaque rules and systems, to kind of pull away that opaque curtain, but also the sponsorship, meaning to open literal doors, to open the figurative doors too, to give you access to information, funding, tools, networking opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise without that sponsor dragging you into the room, holding your hand, opening the door and introing you, right?
Mm.
I really believe this is our responsibility if we want to see a better world. And so there's almost nothing I like more than weaving my way into systems and then jamming open the doors for others. And I think generationally, that's been frankly lacking in older generations for those like Gen X and below. I would say I'm not a Gen X person, right? So I can't speak to
We
that personal
are.
experience. Yeah. I'm sure you can speak to that experience.
Well, there's also boomers in the workplace, right?
Yeah, I mean, different generations have done things differently.
Yes, and to build on that, different generations have had different challenges. My generations, and especially in a tech world, in a tech industry, was not many women were there when I started. So lack of role
Yeah.
models and
Mhm.
or definitely good ones for me as a woman entering a technical field, in my 20s. Different challenges for the generations, but what I love about the sponsorship is I see it for people, and it could be generational, could also be that you're new to a specific company, that regardless, despite the generation, you're just new to a different reality. And the sponsorship I see as now suddenly you have someone, a co-pilot, and all of a sudden you can access the carpool lane, right? So now
Mhm.
there's two of you in this
Yeah.
career car, and you can go on the carpool lane. So it really, the sponsorship accelerates, and especially for women. And what I love is when the sponsor is a male, the different gender, and because
Mhm.
there's more of a diversity there, there's a different perspective that your sponsor can offer. So love that too, and the mentors, of course.
Definitely. And they're priceless when you feel and you have real demonstrable proof that someone is not only having your back, but also like guiding you. And there's a lot that you won't see because you haven't been in those spaces before.
Right.
So a mentor and a sponsor can help you see the open doors and say, no, no, you should lean hard toward that thing. And you should be unapologetic about asking for X, Y, and Z. Great. You know, or let me help you. Let me review your email and help you have a tone that's less apologetic and more direct. I do that all the time. And I love doing that because I'm like rooting for the person that I'm working with to further excel, whether it's a mentee, an advisee, a leader that I'm supporting is something, right? And I'm behind them thinking, yes, let's get it.
That's so great. And we should say, Jillian, also you're a member of Chief organization as well.
Yes.
So that is so wonderful to be in that position to mentor and be a sponsor.
Maybe tell our listeners what Chief is in a sentence or two.
Sure. The Chief is an executive women's club. So it's a members club for high level and powerful women, I would say. So
Like
that's
you.
the best, I think that's the best description.
So, Jillian, we want to ask you a couple questions to wrap up. And one thing that we ask most every guest is if a leader remembers only one thing from this conversation 6 months from now, what do you want it to be?
Yeah, I would say I feel so strongly about this, and I do not see it in all leaders. And I think it is really important. So I hope that every leader that listens to this remembers that your colleagues or team's success is your success also. And your success is their success. That is what teamwork is. That's what being a good leader is recognizing that other people's success is part of your success and it's driving your own success also.
Yeah, remove that ego. We love that. We talk
Yeah.
about that a lot here.
Yeah, or evolve it. Some egos are more resistant than others, but you can evolve into a broader view of is the team, is all of us, is the success of the company. Jillian, thank you. Where can people find more about you, how to get in touch with you? And we'll put all the links and notes in the show notes.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy to get in touch with me. You can find me online on my website at jillianjfoster.com. It's Jillian with a J, and then there's a letter J in the middle, and then my last name, foster.com. And I'm also Jillian J. Foster on LinkedIn, if you can locate me there, if you're on LinkedIn. And I would say that's the best spots. Yeah. And then for my business, you can find us at Global Insight, which our URL is g-insight.org. And we're on LinkedIn also.
Fantastic. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
That is where we leave it for today. What a candid and practical conversation with Jillian. The biggest takeaway here is how we think about our teams. When geopolitical conditions or business priorities shift beneath a global team, the org chart is not what holds things together. The relationships do. Leading a resilient team means continually extending dignity to one another and recognizing that your colleague's success is directly tied to your own. Jillian also shared a powerful framework for driving real institutional change. Lasting transformation rarely happens top-down or all at once. It starts with a small group of aligned people working in concert to create a steady wave of change across the entire system. As you go into your week, consider where you are placing your focus. Whose growth are you actively supporting? And who is helping clear the path for you? Jillian, thank you for bringing so much clarity and heart to this conversation. You can connect with her at jillianjfoster.com. We have placed links in the show notes. And until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and take good care of your teams. Ciao.